And there was a lady once, and she called the server, and she's like, she gave the order down, but she's like, please let the chef know that I'm allergic to gluten, lactose, red chili, and I think one more thing. And the poor server went to the chef, and the chef in the middle of the 9 p.m. rush, and he's like, tick, order, whatever. And he says, so what can we get her? And the chef lost it. She's like, go out and tell her to get a taxi. He's like, मैं नहीं बना सकता. It's an Indian restaurant. मैं प्याज के बगैर मतलब, so yeah.
चावल ही उबाल के दे चावल.
Imagine this. You move to a different country. The task at hand is setting up a restaurant. You don't know anyone. You don't have a team. And you have to start everything from the scratch. Location, team, people, everything. And when you do that, you persevere. You go around, do recce, find places, end up opening a restaurant, and you're hit by a pandemic. Yet you persist and end up making that restaurant one of the top-notch restaurants in London within a span of 3 years. The stories of persistence. At Desi Expats, we talk about room of possibilities. We talk to people who persevere, who challenge the status quo. Today's story is about business, bravado, and brilliance. Today's story is about Roop Pratap Chaudhary and Colonel Saab.
That's very kind, guys. Thank you. Thank you for having me down.
Thanks a lot for taking out the time, Roop.
Yeah, taking the time.
Wouldn't have spent Sunday anyhow. Thank you.
Kya haal chal hai, Roop?
Not too bad. Warming up for this. Yeah, not too bad.
That's good. That's good.
Guys.
The Roop, we look at this space and absolutely, first of all, we're loving this background. And I remember first time I came to this place, I was standing there and I was in awe of this whole thing, your father, your mother. And I wanted to, like, before I even ate anything, I wanted to know the story behind this. Like, how did you go about the entire thing? Tell us about the inception of Colonel Saab. How did you go about it?
So before I get to the inception part, let me just say about Colonel Saab. Who Colonel Saab is, the story of my life. My father is still known as Colonel Saab. My father served the Indian Army for next to 3 decades before he ventured into hospitality himself. And this, in my own humble ways, is the journey I undertook as a young child with my father, my mother, extended families. And it's a culmination of all of that. And I think in my own humble ways, it's a love letter to those glorious years, to those glorious journeys, and the upbringing I had with my parents. So, my father would travel every 2 years, 3 years to a different cantonment, to a different city. And, with every new cantonment came a different city and a different, demographic and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think I learned so much in my first 12 years, traveling with them on and on, that I think it was imbibed in my head so clearly that I wanted to put this story out some way or the other. So that's how the idea of Colonel Saab came. And here we are in London now.
Yeah.
Why particularly London though? Because London already was a saturated market for the Desi.
I hear that so often.
Yeah.
Why London? And now I think I used to have very politically correct answers in the first year, but since you guys are friends, I'm just going to say it's like, why not?
Yeah.
I came to this country and when I was thinking of London and people told me, and now people in the business and trade, and they're like, oh, you are still in your late 20s. London will chew you and spit you out.
Yeah.
You can't just have a dream. This is London, for heaven's sake. And but I think I was too persistent. कि London ही करना है. And I think जब planning भी start हुई थी, it was a lot before the pandemic and Brexit, and I thought London would be a great getaway to Europe as well. So London was always, and it's always a great city. It's got a mixed pool. People understand cuisine here. Culture's great.
Yeah.
So all of that.
But Roop, was there ever a moment or some impetus that you decided, okay, मुझे hospitality industry में ही जाना है, or was this always sort of the plan?
Ali, it was how I was raised, how I grew up. I think after my father retired from the army, he got into hotels himself. He started with his first hotel in the year 1994, and he and my mother both grew in this field. And I think as a kid, when your parents are so deeply involved in a business and they're so passionate about something, you end up picking, knowingly or unknowingly, a lot of things from them.
Yeah.
And I think so was the case with me. And I think as soon as I graduated, I think I was in 11th and 12th in boarding, and my dad asked me, like, listen, what do you want to do? And I was so, like every kid confused, ye karna hai, wo karna hai. And he's like, what is the thing that comes most naturally to you and you're passionate about? And I said, I want to be a part of this industry and I want to be a part of the service trade. So after that, I went for hotel management and all of that. Then I came back and then he was like, no, you're too young to join me.
How old were you?
I think I was college, I think 20 or done or so. And so he's like, no, you're too young to join me. I don't want you to take the helm of this business without exactly knowing what happens on grassroots level. So go pick up jobs. So I picked up my first job at a 5-star hotel in New Delhi, and I did a year there, and after that I joined this company in Gurgaon again for 4.5 years.
Okay.
So when I was 26 is when my dad told me, okay, I think, you've done decently okay for yourself, so now you can...
Now you're risk-free.
Now you're risk-free. So that's when I joined my dad at 26.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were just talking about this. For me, when I came here for the first time, and you mentioned the Decor, Abhi, but obviously you're interested in hospitality, and that's very clear. But मुझे ना जब मैं इसको देखता हूँ, for me it's almost you've frozen a moment of a cultural moment of the subcontinent, and that's what comes out in the Decor. Is that something that you were also interested in? Some particular cultural moment? For me, this is very pre-partition subcontinent.
But I think that was the culture Ali, I grew up in. I come from a very small city and a very equally intimate Jat Sikh community. So either our seniors in the family have been with the Indian Army or they've been
associated
with farmers. And a lot of our side did come from Pakistan. So there's a huge influence, in the way our houses are, in the way we all talk, meet, greet, So I think that was it. And I think since this is all my primitive years, I held on to it for a decade before I could actually think I want to make a story out of it and put it ahead to the world.
I also remember when I was going through some of your previous interviews and stuff, ki I was reading about Noor Mahal, and usme ye likha tha ki there are like 5th century painters and artisans who've been invited to like paint onto like walls in Noor Mahal or spaces in Noor Mahal to make them authentic. And the house itself was a family who used to stay in Gujranwala, and then they...
No, that was my family that came down from Gujranwala. And...
it's a city known for good food.
I know, right?
Oh, okay.
मतलब हमारे यहाँ जिस तरह like if you want to have nice barbecue, tikke, bater,
you
go to Gujranwala.
Oh, nice.
So it's in the genes.
Bro, I would literally drive from Lahore to Gujranwala अगर मुझे वो barbecued bater खाने हैं तो.
Bater क्या होता है?
It's
Patridge,
exactly.
Too posh for us. But I read about that.
But it's North India does have that culture. There's lunches you're deciding what's for dinner you're struggling what's for breakfast. So it's all a game of food and it just goes on.
Food is our love language.
So this was an observation that I made at my home. रात को the only conversation is सुबह क्या बन रहा है?
Keep पकाइए यार.
And now I realize it's one of the most hardest things to do because you stay by yourselves here. And it's such a constant struggle, and you realize, why would your mother get irritated or angry? Tell me what you want to eat, and you'd be like, kuch bhi bana do. And she's like, tell me what is kuch bhi, like that.
Don't give me
kuch bhi. So yeah, I mean, coming back, like hospitality was always, it was a part of my second skin, and I frankly wouldn't know anything else to do. I was so passionate about it from my beginning years that I think almost about 16-17 years now working And there is not one day where I can wake up and say, oh, I don't want to go to work, or I'm not feeling it. No, never like that. I think it's like pure love for me. That
That's
place.
amazing.
So that hospitality becomes your second nature. And in fact, we were discussing this, that there's a warmth to this place vis-a-vis wherever we go, like elsewhere in London. And not just that you brought Indian food to London, you also brought Indian hospitality to London, and we feel that warmth. You mentioned it's your second nature, but how did you go about it? How did you when you moved here, what was the difference in hospitality?
एक तो I think one comes from a Punjabi background, so hospitality is persistent there. Secondly, your trade is hospitality.
Yeah.
When I came to this country, it was a complete shock for me as how things were done. I mean, I in my entire life have never called a guest a customer. It's like the biggest
Yeah.
crime you can do.
Yeah.
And when I came in here and I was talking to these men who were in their 40s and 50s working with Michelin star restaurant, referring to people as customers, and I'm like, that you cannot believe somebody to be a guest, I mean, if you end up calling or referring to him as a customer. And when I started Colonel Saab, I had a whole team from all around. But I think within the first 6-7 months is when I realized, no, I need my own people to put the story ahead, or I'll be gone. And it's within the first 4-5 months is when I started getting in people from my part of the subcontinent, because for me this was more about food. For me it was about selling my heritage. This restaurant had my father's name to it. I couldn't
Right.
risk for it to go down, and the times were not easy anyways.
Yeah.
London was a terrible place last year.
Yeah.
Train strikes and this, everybody emerging from COVID. So for me, I didn't even think twice, and a lot of people working with me, my father's now been in the trade for 30 years. Next year is when his companies complete 30 years. I still have the same team members who were with him 30 years from now. The GM of my first hotel came to my hotel as an industrial trainee.
Oh.
Today he's the GM. I have waiters who've fed me milk as a child. They are still there.
Wow.
Wow.
I have people who second generation who've been a part of the same group. So I come from that school of approach and
Yeah.
thought also. So I was like, यार मैं जितना भी कर लूँ, जब तक अपने लोग नहीं होंगे मेरे पास, मैं नहीं कर पाऊंगा. So I went back and I said, who wants to come to London? A lot of them were excited about this prospect, and I just did a lot of intra-company transfers, and I got my own teams here. So I think that makes a lot of difference.
That's amazing to hear. अभी हम cab में आ रहे थे तो we were talking about, okay, when we first came here, what was the thing that stood out? So I first came here, it was my friend's birthday and we booked the private room वहाँ पे. And the hospitality aspect was so stark. Like, it was very visible. It was there. The handwritten thank you note. And I was like, what stood out? So, there's a lot of Indian restaurants. I mean, you go to Mayfair, there's a Michelin star, all of that. But the difference for me was when I came here, the people and the staff made me feel very special. Whereas if I go to somewhere in Mayfair, in one of those restaurants which is already maybe very established, it's almost like they're saying we're the special ones.
Yeah. No, and I think that is what hospitality is all about, guys. I tell everyone there's a substitute for bad or mediocre food. There is never a substitute for bad service.
Absolutely.
And you have no idea, a lady sitting on table 10, the kind of day she's had. A lady sitting on table 1 has probably saved for 2 days to come to your restaurant and eat.
Yeah.
A man who's perhaps traveled from Denmark just so that he could come here and,
Yeah.
it makes you make mistakes on the table. That's all right with me. But make sure that you go that extra mile. Because if you've spent money, you will go down to one of these platforms and review about me. If
Yeah.
you're not content, let's say so. But just imagine a manager going down to, hi Sajan, I hope you enjoyed your dinner. For just to let Sajan, yeah, I'm eating, this man comes down, remembers my name to begin with, talks to me for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And these are very small things, but
Yeah.
a lot of us don't pay so much heed to, especially in the West.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can compare Asian hospitality with the West.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I love it here. I'm not saying in any negative this thing, but I think the hospitality our part of the subcontinent has to offer, it's nowhere in the world.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
So
And I also think you've said multiple times you are after curating the experience instead of just the food. And maybe that is why like you made Colonel Saab a brand in a very saturated market, which was like Desi food in London, right?
Yeah.
That's what stands out for all of us.
You know, Roop, with hospitality, and you've mentioned this already, the key part is having a team.
Yeah.
And a team of trained people who are motivated and, who know how to, deliver that hospitality. Obviously, there's a lot of people who've been with you for a long time. But one of the key challenges, I guess, and we were talking about this in the Western world in general right now, is finding good people for the hospitality business. How do you A, find them, and then B, make sure that the turnover is as minimal as possible?
Well, I think current times are very tough to be in London. It's not a stable market to work and operate in.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not been the case since I've launched. There is not 1 week when you can, let's take it easy. This week. Last year was perpetually one train strike after the other. I think one train strike finished, then the NHS came on strikes and all of that. You can only depend on students for now. So a lot of the students working with me, somebody's pursuing engineering, or somebody's into a whole different field, or now they all work with me. And now they don't know the basics of hospitality. So for me to even train them is a lot of months. But as long as they are motivated and they are willing to learn, and even if they're willing to learn from the mistakes, do it once, do it twice, but please learn it the third time. That's my thing. The team has to be motivated. That's what I believe in. And
I think that part of the entrepreneurial world is very less celebrated. That you mentioned people have stuck around with you for generations, and even here forming that team. It's just it's a big accomplishment.
it is. And my dad would always tell me growing up, which is the biggest challenge you will face when you are doing business. And I wouldn't know, as it, you would say government policies, or you would say rate of interest. And he's like, no, it's your management. If you cannot retain good people in your team, there is no way you will see growth as a person, number one, or you will see growth with your company.
Yeah.
So I think now is when I am in a position where, I feel that, and London, kids are coming, they're here for a couple of months, don't expect them. But I feel I've been very lucky that almost about 2 years and 1 year in pandemic, before that, 80% of my team is still the same.
Oh, that's an achievement.
You will not believe it. I sometimes stand on the host desk. And it's a very common joke after hours here. Somebody will come, I got a job offer from table number 10, or I got a job offer from table number 15, some restaurant is sitting there. And once I was standing at the desk, and this lady walks in, and she's like, I've seen you here often. Do you like it here? I said, I love it here. And she's like, here's my card. Whatever they're paying, you consider a 10% higher. So I came back to my team, and I'm like,
now I believe you guys.
So that's the case.
You should have actually talked about your paycheck. Like, oh, do you want a match?
No, but we're all here for a reason. Everybody's here. Everybody's struggling to make ends meet, and so some way or the other. So I don't blame if somebody wants to leave me for 50 cents or £1. That's not the case here. But I tell everyone, if you have to leave me, please go to a place that you're actually learning something from. Go to a place that is one notch better than me. Go to a place that has good working environment. You don't have to join a big company. Go and work under a great boss. Even if it's a small restaurant, as long as you're enjoying your 9 hours of work and then going home, I think that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was just saying, coming to the team bit, I think I have read a lot about the head chef here, Chef Sohan Bhandari. Can you tell us a bit about what was that decision process like? How did you get him on board or decide to get him on board?
So Sohan Bhandari was actually recruited by a lady called Karen Anand, who was my original food curator for Colonel Saab. And Sohan had been working in Dubai for a lot of years. And it was a telephonic interview we did with Sohan. And the and Sohan, I think, flew down. Mrs. Anand flew down to Dubai to take his trials. But I happened to, and I was my only thing. I was like, "Ma'am, कुछ भी करो, खाना वगैरह सब सीख लेते हैं, बस team संभालने में अच्छा हो, and you should be good with his costings." And that was my only concern. Okay, you know, but luckily he turned out to be, a man of metal, and he's again with me. He's actually currently he's flying back from India. He's gone there on a recruitment drive.
Okay.
So he flies in tonight. But been very blessed with my team here. Extremely blessed.
So you talked about the food curation, and I remember even when we came. So you pick a dish, and I think you pick some local dish every now and then, and you include that in the menu. So I think kettle and beef was a part of
A lot of the things. So basically, I wanted to do India justice here. Whenever I would come to India, I would always struggle to understand Indian food, frankly speaking.
In what sense?
In what sense? Like, there were a lot of dishes which I had never heard about in India, frankly. They were a curation of the West and made for the West. And when I used to go back to India, I used to be appalled. That's such a gloriously vast country. A country where your religion, your food preferences, your caste, your creed, your dialect, your language is changing every 200 kilometers. And we come down to India and you box us in 7 dishes, chicken
Yeah.
tikka masala,
Yeah.
all of that. And it was appalling for me. And I said, I don't want to do I want to do justice when I come here. So when I had eventually approached Mrs. Anand, actually I'd read about Mrs. Anand when I was a schoolboy. It's a very funny story. In my school library, there used to be a series of those thin brochures, and smart cooking for students, smart cooking for intelligent men, smart cooking for working
For
women, smart
intelligent
cooking for
men.
expecting mothers and stuff, everything. And I read a book called Smart Cooking for Intelligent Men. And I was again struggling with the food aspect, and I was back in India. And whomever I would talk to had their own perspective. Ki, London may have, you should do fusion. And I said, I don't want to do any of this stuff. I mean, I want to stick to my culture, my roots, my heritage, my family. And somebody arranged a Zoom call for me, and it was somebody said, I'm gonna have you're struggling to curate your menu. I'm gonna have somebody called Karen, and I heard Carol. So I said, "Koi hogi yahan ki?"
हाँ, यहाँ की.
And suddenly I saw the Zoom went on, and Mrs. Anand was sitting in a black shirt, and Mrs. Anand, like those wonderful expressions she talks with. And I couldn't speak for the first 60 seconds. I was dumbfounded. And eventually, the girl was like, Am I audible? Am I audible? And, trying to get the conversation started. And that's how I met Mrs. Anand. Then I approached her right away. I said, Ma'am, this is the concept. And she was then writing her 23rd cookbook called Masala Memsaab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, she was busy with writing and all of that. And she's like, Tell me, what do you want? I said, Ma'am, I've traveled through India and I've had such a glorious culinary experience, and not in restaurants. Like, even if there are two aunts, your masis, both of them would have a different way of cooking the same dal.
Yeah.
So I said, Ma'am, I want to go to all those cities where my father was posted as a captain, a major, a lieutenant major, a colonel, and I want to pick up dishes from those. So we spent a month and a half traveling to all those cities, be it Kashmir, Baramulla, Srinagar, came down, went up till the south. And then we went to regular housewives and say, what do you make for dinners and what do you eat for lunches? And it was very basic, somebody used to tell us curry chawal. And then we used to think, can we do curry chawal on our menu? Because it's catering to people of, it's completing that allergent aspect also here. And we realized it's so simple, to get these things.
Yeah.
So 90% of my menu has been curated by literally Indian home wives and homemakers with the guidance of Mrs. Anand. And I think I've stuck to it. I haven't changed my menu since. I mean, I obviously add one odd thing here and there every now and then, but the basics of the menu has been the same. It's about highlighting what we as people from that part of the subcontinent have grown up eating.
Achha, one of the things that I think a lot of Indian restaurants do here, especially if you're in a fancy location, Mayfair or wherever, what I've seen is they'll typically tailor the taste or the spice level to, let's say, cater to a broader type of clientele. तो मेरा हमेशा से ये व्यू होता था कि यार अगर authentic खाना है ना, देसी खाना, you have to go to like a rundown place.
Yeah.
Whitechapel जाना है, तुमने लाहौर कबाब, all of those places. So, was that something you struggled with?
Not really. I mean, you know what? A lot of them are my friends now, and they'll kill me for answering something. But it's a constant struggle. See, we're all running businesses, and you have to understand what's your clientele. If your clientele is right, they're not going to eat. You know, you're dealing with people who can't eat spices.
Yeah.
A lot of them are allergic to lactose, gluten. I mean, I've heard of allergies in this country. People allergic to lemon and
Oh, I've heard that one.
I had
Yeah.
one that
red
was
chilies.
like onions also.
Yeah.
And that is like the base of every,
Every
desi
desi
Yeah.
You can't
dish.
eat Indian food.
You
if
can't
you're-
eat without. So I think जहाँ पर जिसका जो clientele, everybody sticks to that. But the teams had a very tough time in the beginning
Yeah.
days
Yeah.
because people couldn't take, you know, because we were still gauging what's working, what's not working, what to
Yeah.
tone down. And I think the first 3-4 months are like that. And there was a lady once, and she called the server, and she's like, she gave the order down, but she's like, please let the chef know that I'm allergic to gluten, lactose, red chili, and I think one more thing. And the poor server went to the chef, and the chef in the middle of the 9 p.m. rush, and he's like, tick, order, whatever. And he says, so what can we get her? And the chef lost it. She's like, go out and tell her to get a taxi. He's like, मैं नहीं बना सकता. It's an Indian restaurant. अब मैं प्याज की बगैर मतलब, so yeah.
चावल ही उबाल के दे सकते हैं.
So, but you have to cater to a global audience here.
तो आई थिंक एक चीज़ जो बहुत ज़्यादा स्टैंड आउट करती है soon as you enter Colonel Saab is the decor. It's full of chandeliers if anyone can see, and it's beautiful. और मैंने कहीं पढ़ा था कि most of the artifacts here are from travels that your family had, and it's like a collection that you've done over the years. What's one thing that's very close to your heart, like an artifact or a piece of decor?
I think my parents' portraits. I think, that's my dad and that's my mother. They are by far the most cherished. So even if I'm doing something wrong, standing there, I exactly know who's watching me. But my mother took to art at a very young age, right after my father ventured into hospitality, and both of them worked together. But mom took a very keen interest. She was always a painter, but never did anything commercially as such. But she just took to art. So she got very involved in curating art, picking up museum-worthy antiques. And unfortunately, India doesn't have a lot of value for antiques. And I think she realized in the mid-90s that a chunk of India's genuine artifacts were being sold all abroad. And from whatever money she could manage, little, she started buying art. So when I was doing Colonel Saab, and for example, I have a bar here. That bar was made by Asprey in 1922 for the Maharaja of Patiala.
Oh.
And she's like, take it. But I was like, ये तो यहाँ कोने में पड़ा रहता था. She's like, yeah, but this was made for the Maharaja.
Wow.
So that's how I got that. These tenjors are mid 18th century. The door behind you is again early 19th century. That is embroidery done on very old Persian silk. So a lot of the things they had picked up as a couple, but alongside even their love letters, my dad's love letters written to my mom in the 70s and 80s.
That's so sweet.
Actually, that's fine. So, imagining, people of that age writing love letters to each other. मेरे मम्मी पापा नहीं करते.
But I think, these things also romanticized my head. Even till now, I think my father has a collection of about LPs, 600-700 LPs. और हर LP पे To Bini with Love from Jaipur, 1979.
That's so sweet.
And Mama would save money and she would this thing. And the home was also very eclectic, There'd be biryani being cooked and Mehndi Hassan would be paying. Suddenly Mehndi Hassan would go and Abba would come along. So I think that was my entire upbringing. It was it was very cosmopolitan, but yet it was very rooted, and there was a very fine line between Tamiz and Tehzeeb, which was a big part of our household, and also cousins alongside us. So, ek sare Fauji, sare Punjabi, you know, so there was a lot of hosting, and you know, so, and if you go to any of a typical Indian army officer's wife's house, you'll find a lot of these accents, you'll find a lot of these plates, you'll find a lot of these carpets rolled away, you'll find a lot of these fridge magnets, you might find a lot of books and LPs. So I was surrounded by all of them growing up, you know. So when I was doing this restaurant and my mother was helping me with the interiors, and the main architect asked me, so what do you vision the place to be like? And I was like, just an extension of my drawing room. I want a picture of my bhua here, I want a picture of my masi here, I want their family members, I want a picture of my teachers who've been a part of my journey. So anything that mattered to me while growing up is here on the walls. So I think for that ways it makes me more powerful, you know, because I'm walking surrounded by so much love on an everyday basis, you know. So everything I've known is on the walls here.
तो रूप अभी हम यही बात कर रहे थे, you know, when I entered and I saw the carpets, my dada was a colonel in the army, and it was a very similar type of house as well, with all of these artifacts, and you know, we had family friends who owned some of the very old havelis in the walled city in Lahore. So I saw this carpet and I was taken back to my dada's house. You know, I just remembered that those big lawns and those kursiyan bahar lagi hui, and like
and there was a certain charm to all of this.
You know, that was a beautiful generation.
Beautiful
generation. वो नहीं वापस आ सकती generation.
You were telling me your dada had this group of friends जो ऐसे हर weekend आते थे.
The friendships of that generation, honestly, they were amazing. So one of my dada's very close friends, both of them have passed away now, so their family is still like very close with us, and I went there, and her Nawasi, she took me to one of the rooms, or she opened the room and it had like all these whiskey bottles, Purani padi hui. They're like, you know, Ali, your dada every day he used to come here at 7 ki gaadi idhar khadi hoti thi, and he used to sit with my nana and they used to have a drink,
and they kept those bottles
for 30 years non-stop. He would do that every day, jo marzi ho jaye. We don't have those friendships anymore. That generation was just you know, something
I think the priorities for that generation was very different when it came to relations and all. It was much deeper.
He kept saying one thing जो मुझे बहुत funny लगती थी, because it's true for me as well. वो पुराने घरों के दरवाजे कभी बंद नहीं होते थे. They were like always open.
There was a rule in my dada's house. So we had 2 gates. दोनों खुले रखने.
हमेशा.
You couldn't close the gates. एक दफा डकैती पड़ गई थी. 2 दफा actually. 2 दफा. फिर एक गेट बंद किया मैंने. What's the purpose of that?
What's the purpose of a gate? But actually, पुराने घरों में they would only close the gates at night. That they would, because they would. It would be. It was actually a way of that the house is always open and the table is always around. You know, the kitchens are always open.
In fact, even at my place, there was a ritual that at night before sleeping, you lock the gate. Otherwise, it's just open throughout. And people can just come.
But I think that's a very Punjab, our side tradition.
I agree.
People do it. But it's a great
and
thing.
And again, it goes back to the hospitality aspect that you mentioned.
No. It's very true. We've grown up around it. So, you know, it's not that hard to inculcate it, I feel.
I think it's hard to like extend it to other people, but
Yeah. But you know, talking about, you know, the extending aspect, I think this restaurant, and I think you mentioned this a couple of times, this is an extension of your family heritage as well. I remember you telling me a story when we came here for dinner, I think it was a few months ago, about the cocktail menu. And how every cocktail
is named after someone.
It's a family member, isn't it? And I remember you telling me you went to Paris. Who was this? Was it Anthony?
So there was a man called Anthony Burton who was the head mixologist of the Ritz in Paris for a lot of years. And when Anthony was approached to do the menu, and he's like, what do you want the liquor to be? And then I thought, listen, we have 5 people who are the closest to me. So one was my dad, Colonel Saab, my mother, who's referred as Memsaab here, and one is a childhood friend called Punchu. So Punchu, Mr. Puri Mr. Puri is actually the general manager for our hotel in Karnal. and he's also been a great mentor to me throughout. So for him, and the fifth one is Noora, which is my elder sister. So I asked them, I said, what do you guys drink? Tell me. So my dad was like whiskey and my mom was like whiskey. I'm like, no, I can't have two whiskey cocktails. Tell me another one. So my mom was like, kuch bhi kar de. You know, so I made Colonel Saab, I made Memsaab, I made Punchu, Mr. Puri. So 5 cocktails that became our signature cocktails here. And they're still there. So,
What's the feistiest drink, Roop?
you know, I think I should make it after me now.
That's a good one.
I think they're very regular cocktails. It's not like that, but it's just a little twist given to them. You know, like all the cocktails have some or the other Indian spice or Indian herb. So, you know, that brings out the Indian element.
I have a very funny story from this. Like once my team was down from LA and we went to a cocktail bar and I bought a like cocktail that was called the Indian Rupee and it had like a dried red chili floating on top. And my boss from LA, who's American like by birth and like he was brought up there, he's like, what is this? I'm like, red chili, we put it in like spicy dishes. He's like, I bet it can't be that spicy. I was like, be my guest. He actually ate it and then he was crying. He had to go to the washroom. He was like in such a bad place. He was like one teeny red chili that he put. I was like, don't mess with Indian spices, man. Like, why would you do that?
There's one whiskey sour with some spices, right? I think it's Mr. Puri.
No,
or
it's Colonel Saab. It's Colonel
I've had
Saab,
that.
yes.
It's the OG.
My dad's a whiskey drinker. I
Yeah.
think very Fauji in his taste. I think he's never tried perhaps anything apart. He's like, you know,
It's
none of
beneath
the...
him.
No, you know, that generation didn't know a lot about gins and
Yeah.
tonics and vodkas, but whiskey drinker. And so I said, let me just call this drink after your name.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's a very Punjabi thing as well. So before I went to Delhi, I didn't know much about gin, vodka, etc. Ghar pe whiskey chaldi, whiskey.
Whiskey, beer, perhaps.
Yeah.
Beer is
Sundays is like beers in
Exactly.
the morning, and then there are those 2-3 cocktails. Bloody Mary, I
Oh,
think.
my dada used to love
Yeah,
Bloody Mary.
yeah.
They used to do a Bloody Mary brunch.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
every Sunday or something.
It's a very Fauji thing actually.
Yeah.
These things. Yeah.
It's very cool to see how ये दोनों जो Fauji cultures हैं across the border is
Yeah.
very
It's
similar.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Maybe not now, but definitely like my dada's generation. I think maybe it's different now.
My grandfather's real brother, he's in his 90s now. Late 90s perhaps. I don't think he's a brigadier. And if I look at him, my father's brothers from either sides, my mother's brother-in-laws, my masters, and everybody has that same culture. You know, everyone, you go to everybody's house, everybody's eating habits, drinking habits, it's all the same. Yeah.
Very romantic generation as well.
Absolutely.
Happy. So my dad says, यार एक lovely जा बना दे, lovely.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah.
So, Roop, tell us about your most memorable, favorite customer anecdote.
Guest anecdote.
Oh, my bad.
No, I think I made a lot of good friends with my guests here, and because I genuinely believe in getting out of my comfort zone and saying hi to people. So last night, for example, there was a guest, and she gave me a perfume as a gift.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She comes here every time. Every time I remember her. Every time I remember her daughter's name, her granddaughter's, and she's like, "Here, we just saw your Instagram. It was your birthday." There are so many people I've met along that journey. I think I would rather skip an event or a dinner where my energies will be exhausted. Just be here, meet these interesting people, get to know their stories.
Yeah.
So
Were you very extroverted like as a kid growing up or?
I wasn't an extrovert at all, but I think the profession demanded a certain
Yeah.
level of networking to be done here and there,
Yeah.
which I've completely stopped last year onwards. Because I just realized there's a certain energy you wake up with all day long.
Oh, yes.
And if I want to be seen at, what's the point of me being a restaurateur with 300 people in here and I'm going to a networking event, having a cocktail and saying hi to 100 random people. So
Yeah.
I might as well make that effort go down here,
Hmm.
network and say hi to people,
Yeah.
and then take it there.
Hi
Yeah.
to your guests.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, listening to your entire story being a people's person and being good with people is so important in this. Also, I
It's
think
an
generally in
art.
life.
Yeah.
It's an art. It's very important,
Yeah.
Ali. I don't know why you don't see it around, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate how at what level and speed it's depleting.
Hmm.
My father, I also learned this from my father. He would walk down at any of his hotel lobbies. He would exactly know the name, and this is 900 people working with him.
Yeah.
He would know the names. आपके बेटे की शादी होगी, बिटिया कौन सी क्लास में है, ये कौन सी, and I would look at him and I would say, how is it humanly possible, you
Yeah.
know? And he's like, you've got to learn it.
Yeah.
You can't just go to your office. And I said,
Yeah.
these are the things I learned from him. You know,
Yeah.
it's very important to be a people's person. You know, sometimes I'll go for a haircut and he'll come and ask me, so where was your hairdresser from? I said, what do I know? And he will go to a haircut, अच्छा कहाँ से हो, घर पे कितने लोग हैं, क्या है, you know, that
Yeah.
generation did it and does it,
100%.
and it worked for them.
Yeah.
All my life he would ask me, what's the most important thing when you grow up?
Yeah.
You know, one day you'll be doing your own stuff, tell me that. And I would always tell him it's knowledge, it's your passion for your work and all of that. And he would keep on listening to me, and every time he would say, no, it's the relations you build.
Yeah.
It's the
Celebration.
creation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad's in his late 60s now, but I think when I learned from that generation, I want to continue this thing. So you will not see me at any events.
Yeah.
You don't see me. I mean, I believe that I might as well be here and put that energy towards Colonel Saab and its growth,
Yeah.
rather than being at place where, you know,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
And that's true for not just hospitality industry, it's true for any industry.
any.
Yeah.
Knowing people.
Very true.
Sometimes, yes, you have to go out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
But I think that's a very important parameter to have. Like, you are able to outreach, talk, put your point of view, and more than anything else, just value the other person.
Yeah.
And make that person feel special in that moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, a lot of being, you know, a people's person is being outwardly directed.
Yeah.
Right. You know, when you're meeting someone, you're really focused on them.
Yeah,
The problem we have
Yeah.
is, and what most people have, because I think humans are generally like, we have a, you know, bit of narcissism in all of us, and we're thinking about ourselves, even when we're talking to someone else.
Yeah.
So it's a skill you develop over time, and I think with you, probably you picked it up from your father when you
No,
were
I
seeing
picked it
him
up
do
from a young age because I was surrounded with people growing up. I think when I went to hostel also, I was there all my schooling years. This continued with me throughout. I was always inquisitive about something. You know, if two ladies would be sitting down and talking about their homes, I would be that third wheel somewhere and listening to it. And even at home, you know, my mother would go and meet my nanny, and the other cousins would be out there cycling and badminton and perhaps cricket, and I would be listening to what my nanny has to say, gathering from those stories, connecting with them, just listening to them. I think that was the biggest knowledge, listening people all around me, and I think it's very easy to resonate with the other person.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so many of us, we listen to respond and not to understand.
We've got a monologue going on while we
Yeah.
listen to the other
Absolutely.
person.
It's like इसके बाद
Absolutely.
क्या बोलना है उसके point
उसके,
पे.
हाँ.
हाँ,
A
तो-
good conversation is almost like a table tennis match. And you have to, both people have to play.
Yeah.
So, Roop, if not this hospitality business, what would you rather be doing? Like, if it was not Colonel Saab?
I think I would have gone down. I've never thought it that way. But if I've not, then I think it would be writing or something. My majors in my college was journalism.
Oh,
I
there's a fellow literature lover here.
because I thought that I want to stick to hospitality all my life, but I want to pursue this other, you know, the art of listening and imbibing everything happening around me. So my majors was in journalism and my minors was in hospitality. Yes.
Yeah, I remember reading something recently when like writers have writer's block. So I think it was like Maya Angelou or someone who was like, if you have a block, just go talk to 5 people
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
have a
yeah.
story the
You
next
have a
day.
story there. And I think even if you look around us, guys, like there's so much of, you see painters, you see
Yeah.
designers, you see artists, and now the ones you would resonate or connect with are people that have real, genuine stories.
Yeah.
You know,
You know, I feel like if you were a writer, you were a very nice travel writer. You know, the William Dalrymple type. Going to a new place,
Oh, I love
you
that.
know, absorbing the culture and then writing about that, writing a story about
Or
that.
food writer.
no, not
No,
a food
I
writer,
think because
definitely not. I mean,
even for
but yeah, definitely do something to do with writing. I would
Yeah.
always maintain a journal. In fact, sometimes if I look at my old diaries, even my grocery lists were like a journal.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that parsley.
Oh my god.
But yeah, but I think
Yeah,
this is a whole
yeah.
different line. You know, you've got to be up and about all the time.
Yeah.
It's exhausting working. So that is aspect. It's still around, and I'm sure one of them days it's
Yeah.
gonna be out. Yeah.
You should write like a documentary or a movie someday when you're like doing your second innings and you're like an ode to
You know,
partition
I did
food.
get a very nice book offer recently to write the story about Colonel Saab.
That would
Not-
be
Not the
interesting.
aspect about the business aspect,
Yeah.
but the entire line about how impressionable a young mind is. That
Oh,
something you
nice.
see for 12 or 10 years in your life,
Yeah.
Very interesting.
and you come to a whole different city. Imagine the level of passion that 10 years have had on you,
Yeah.
that you want to come and showcase to it to the world.
Yeah.
So they were very interested, but I was like, it's a little too early now. Let me come up with something else after this.
No,
And
but
then-
like while you were describing Colonel Saab, जब शुरू में हम बात कर रहे थे, it just sounded like an ode to the not just the food, but just the life back in the days in the 90s pre-partition या फिर
No,
90s में
that's
like
what this feels like, right? You know, Roop has seen a particular culture for X amount of years.
yeah.
And he has
Especially
decided to share it with the world.
In the
That's
form
what
of
this-
like food and hospitality.
Yeah.
It's just the format.
And when you
is
would not
this.
believe it, when I was starting Colonel Saab, I think everyone just got against me. The PR agencies,
Why?
the marketing heads, and you know, and these were very, you know, well-known people in the industry, and they're like, "What the hell is Colonel Saab?" And I'm like, "It's the story of my father."
Yeah.
And they're like, "What is the world got to do with it? It's your father."
Yeah.
And it can't be Colonel Saab because it reflects colonial repression. And I would never get it. I said,
Oh.
it's not about your perspective of Colonel Saab. Colonel Saab's my dad. I'm writing about my dad's stories.
Yeah.
I'm putting my life onto your plates. You
Yeah.
like it? There's a market for everyone out there.
Yeah.
I told my market agencies, I said, there'll be 9 people who come out and hate me up front, but there'll be that one person who might resonate with my story and might want to come back. And let me open this restaurant for that one person. So everyone around me, and I think beginning of Colonel Saab, I think the more rejections I got for Colonel Saab is the stronger I became in my head. And I think I developed a very crazy coping mechanism, which is not called, but it's like hearing and listening. So first
Acha.
I would listen to everyone.
Right.
Everyone. So if you have to say, tell me something, I would listen to what this person is saying. And then, am I doing right? Am I doing wrong? And then when there came a time for me to get this vision, a shape and reality, and I realized my own parents were in doubt because they couldn't understand. They're like, we've been army officers, we've been hoteliers later in our life. What's so special about this?
Yeah.
I said, again, that is not your perspective of your lives. That is my perspective from my life to you.
Yeah.
So everyone, it can't be Colonel Saab. This is Central London. This is this. This is that. I said, it's going to be Colonel Saab now. So I stopped listening to anybody had to say.
Wow, this is so
Wow.
Yeah.
so profound.
You could have a 2-hour conversation with me, bro, and I will not even listen to you for 2 hours. And I think even till today, somebody's saying, why are you at your most chillest,
Yeah.
this and that? Because I said, I do not listen. I hear. There is so much of blabber all
Yeah.
around us.
So much noise. So much noise.
So much of blabber that it's so hard to differentiate a voice from noise.
Yeah.
And I think I'd rather spend 10 minutes hearing somebody intelligent rather than, so-
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a very good
Yeah.
lesson actually for us as well.
Yeah.
You know, when you're starting something out and a lot of people give you
Everybody
advice.
has,
Yeah.
And-
everyone, I think.
Somewhere your gut knows what's right, and like you mentioned earlier as well, you wake up with certain amount of energies.
Yeah.
you may not want to spend those energies listening
Yeah.
to things that are
Absolutely.
not like.
Listening is not a passive thing. It takes a lot of energy out of you.
It does take a lot of energy because it compels you to question your own credibility.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I would be listening to these people who had been in the industry for 40 years, 45 years, and they would be talking to me like this, and they would tell me, Colonel Saab, oh, this and this restaurant closed after opening 3 months, 4 months,
Oh
5
my
months.
God.
This is London. This is, you're surrounded by 7 Michelin stars in your neighborhood. You can't, We are, restaurants then were coping up with 200, 250 covers a night.
Yeah.
It was a struggle to get. This was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And they're like, you can't. Who's going to come listen to your story? You are an Indian, And they made it was blatant on your face. But I think that defense the coping mechanism I created that, I think that's got me till here. Never listen.
In that spirit, what was the one time when you felt ki up to gaye?
Yeah,
Like
what was
this
the most
is
challenging
like
moment?
rock bottom, but then something switched.
Rock bottom ye tha, so rock bottom I wouldn't say was rock bottom, but I think that entire pandemic. So when I incorporated a company here and banks were involved in all of that. And what happened was, I think Wednesdays when the banking came through, and Monday the country went into a lockdown.
Oh my God.
So the entire year, there was a team of about, back then, the ones that were recruited, 20, 25 people, all of us stuck in a foreign country. A lot of them perhaps who had been on a plane for the first time, stuck in a foreign country, looking at one another for answers, all away from home, all petrified of what was happening back home, looking at me for answers. And here I was looking at sources to derive that strength from. You need something to derive from, and then you generate it within, right? And I was, and there was you couldn't see any lining, or hope anywhere, because ek mahina tha, 2 mahina, then it became 6 months, and then it became a year. And banks are nobody's friends. If you've got to pay the interest, interest has started. So for an entire year, this place was closed down, and I couldn't apply for any government help as well, because they were like, you haven't been trading enough. So you can't apply for any scope. So the salaries were on, everything was on. This building, every little expense was to be paid for. That year gave me a lot of strength. And because I realized I have to put on a very brave face, not for me, but for my team. And not realizing that the team was giving me strength indeed. First year, that year was such a learning curve. Believe you me, I mean, I don't wish it on anyone, because here I was about to start something and everyone around me was closing down. And then this had my father's name on it. It had the credibility of a company that's been in India for 30 years. And it's not a public listed company. So whatever has been created by my dad and mom. So there was so much of zeal and hope that I could see with every passing month. It's going down, going down. And it does take a toll on you, I mean, But the team was looking at me for answers, and there are these men, they're all men in their 40s and early 50s, looking at me for strength. And, but I think it was, I don't know, I think God puts his hand where you'd least expect him to be. I think that year got us through. And the team was very supportive as well.
As you were saying this, I feel like maybe part of what got you through is you didn't only think of this as a business. You thought of this as an extension of your father's legacy. It was an idea and a concept. And once you have that type of thinking, it does help you persist. If you only think of something economically, then you'll take the first step.
A lot of people told me, do this, do that, apply for more funding, change the name, withdraw from the banks. So much, I mean, the legal teams, you're surrounded by it morning, day, afternoon, all furious. The companies back in India furious at me because their credit rating gets affected if I'm not trading. And so there was again so much coming in from this thing. And I believe you, merely when I came here, I had no support system. So I didn't even know print out नीचे से जाके कहाँ से लेके आना है. It was like that naive, and I don't know how. But I think this vision ki nahi, I'm not
Yeah.
going to this thing. I have meant to be Unstrippable for, which was the teams who've given up such prime careers to come and join me because I have this vision for it. I said no. So their salaries were on. They were all, a lot of them were at home. I said no. They did ask me. They're like, you don't have to pay us. You can only pay us for our rents and stuff. But I said no. You've come here. You're all my responsibility, and I have to take care of you. I think it was, they gave me strength. I took, whatever I could offer them. So just a lot of strength exchanging happening that
That's
year.
such a nice story.
I know you love being on the floor as well, Roop. When you're standing there and you're seeing, an idea you had in your mind being transformed into this space and being transformed into an experience that a lot of your guests are having, what does it feel like?
It, feels magical, Ali. I mean, I'll tell you, the biggest feedback I can receive is from a guest. No amount of awards, no amount of publications can give me as much, power and, that a guest gives me. So even if a guest walks up to me, oh, are you Roop? That's your father, that's your mother, and your team told us about the story, and it's so good to meet you. That's it. For me, that is like, day well settled.
So, Roop, this is something we usually ask to all our guests. What is that one thing you would tell to your 21-year-old self, the Roop who just graduated, looking for answers? Now you've arrived. And so, what would you tell to this?
I haven't
kid?
arrived. I like to believe it. I think it's a constant journey. But I think one was a little clueless at 21. Yeah, but I don't blame myself for that. Yeah, because the age is such, and I want to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And, it takes time. But yes, if I had the same wisdom when I had for 21, I would have just got into hospitality like right there and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And shout out to someone who's been doing really well. Somebody you admire.
A lot of people in restaurateurs, see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in London since you've
Especially.
moved here.
There are a lot of people I admire, but if I have to derive something out of their journeys, would be Mrs. Khan from Darjeeling Express.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Sameer from Banaras. They're lovely people, and there's so much of effort and power they put. Again, they are great storytellers who put their stories into being such fulfilling founders today. And I think London is such a tricky city, believe me, for restaurateurs. It's not a cakewalk. For them to have such a lovely name throughout these years, it's beautiful. So yes, Mrs. Khan from Darjeeling Express and Sameer. I think the entire team at Banaras, they're all darlings. Yeah, it's lovely. Great people.
Yeah.
So that's Desi community rooting
Yeah.
for each other.
Yeah,
I know.
that's
right?
very good to hear.
Great
One of
goal.
the things I've really learned from this entire conversation is if you want to go out and you want to create something, you have to focus on a story you want to tell and try and express that story in any platform, whether that's a business or whether that's a form of art. This is very informative for me.
Yeah.
Even, not just informative, very inspiring as well.
For me, I think it was the point where you said when the why of doing something is clear in your head, the obstacles, you can just go through them.
And I think that's lovely. I learned that recently too. Our problems is when we start comparing our journeys to somebody else's, And, when I hear this line, oh, the grass is greener on that side, I said, it's no, the grass is greener is where you water it, guys.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So, if you've got a journey, work towards it. My mom would tell me, I used to always contemplate, कि करना चाहिए या नहीं करना चाहिए, जहाँ पैसा involved होता है वहाँ पर you have to take
Yeah.
a lot of answers. You're questionable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And she's like, listen, I don't want you to be a certain age one day and regret for not doing it.
Yeah.
She said, you pass good enough, you don't pass, at least you wouldn't have that thing.
Yeah.
She's like, if you've got dreams, believe in them, they'll themselves guide you.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I look at my journey and there are people all around me. The Indian hospitality scene I'll talk about. Everybody's at least way more senior to me in years of experience in the kind of restaurants they've had. But I always send out love, and I think all of them, like when I came here, I knew no one. Believe you me, restaurant scene. Today, it's like a kitty thing going
Have it on
on.
WhatsApp. You can DM them.
And they're so warm, and you know, and sometimes something happens, and I'm like, you know, it's the kind of energies you put out to them. There's no point of me being envious of them. This was your journey, you created it, you know. I'm happy about mine, and I'm equally happy about yours.
Yeah.
So I think that's where also, you know, so much of strength coming in your
Yeah.
way, because you're sending out that level of strength.
Yeah,
So,
I love that point as well, because I think कहीं हमारा ऐसे एक notion रहता है that desis don't champion other desis sometimes, but
Yeah.
I feel like with the desis I've interacted with, oh, they've championed me to the limit.
Yeah.
They've helped me to the limit.
You know, initial सबको रहता है. When I came to
हाँ.
this city, everybody was very skeptical. Firstly, this story of Colonel Saab, nobody could understand it.
Yeah.
Secondly, it was a central London location. Third, people had this perspective in their head, okay, this kid comes from a certain privilege. It's going to be easy for him. तो नहीं भी होगा तो साल में घर चले जाएगा या 6 महीने में घर चल जाएगा. But people didn't realize that the vision, the fire in me was beyond, like,
Yeah.
and so now is when they realize 2 years into the trade, you end up knowing one another, acquaintances. And every time I meet them, and I always genuinely, I mean, I put out good energies towards all of them, you know. So it comes back.
Thank you, Roop.
Thank you
It
so
was
much, Roop.
Such a thrilling conversation.
No, thank you guys.
And Roop,
Absolutely.
we're wishing you all the best. I certainly hope you're able to tell the story of Colonel Saab to the world.
One
Good
day
luck
for
with
sure.
that.
Good luck to you guys.
Thank
as
you
well.
so
Thank you,
much.
Roop.
Thank you.
Thank you.